Sometimes the most obvious path is going to be the wrong one. In this position it is clear that black is trying to push for an advantage, having this extra knight left on the board, but the king is kind of far away from the action, and white is threatening to trade off the last pawn that black has, and black has three options that it can play with this pawn. It can either push to h6, h5 or take the pawn. So let's start by discarding the most obvious mistake. If we take the pawn, this is actually going to be pretty simple for white, because as this very smart board tells us, the king can go to f5, and now this prevents the push of the pawn. The king is simply too far away, and the knight is 2 diagonal steps away from this pawn, and so white is going to pick up the pawn and simply draw the game. And some of you might think, well, this is obvious, we need to go to h5 and simply run with the pawn. But again, this is a blunder. The king can simply run down and chase the pawn. And if black tries to defend the pawn, well, actually the king now can come to g5. Black cannot move either the pawn, because it's going to be taken, or the knight, because again the pawn is going to be undefended. But if it brings the king, now the king is going to come to h6. If the pawn moves, now the white king can actually take this knight. Black can run, but white will be just as fast to get their own queen, and the two pawns will promote at the exact same time. So by exclusion, the winning move is the more patient h6. This time, if the king tries to reach the pawn, black needs to be very precise, and it's going to chase the king with his own king. White has nothing better but to try and stop the pawn by coming around, but this time black can actually go to g7 with his own knight, because the knight and pawn are going to defend all of these key squares in front of the white king. White has to keep an eye on the pawn, but in the meantime we can bring our own king, and eventually black is going to be able to pick up the white pawn and win the game. But the story is not over, because when you decide to play h6, you need to calculate another variation with king to e6, ignoring the pawn and going after the knight. Because remember, white has a pawn that is only 2 steps away from getting a new queen, which is why h5 is a blunder. This fails to king f7, attacking the knight. And if you ignore it and you simply push the pawn, white can take the knight off the board, and now again both sides get a queen at the same time. Which means that in this position the only winning move for black is the very precise king to d4. How are we preventing the king from going to f7 and attack the knight? We aren't, but we do now have king to e5. A brilliant move that sacrifices the knight, but after the knight is taken by the king, black has king to f6, stopping the pawn, and after black picks up this pawn, the pawn is going to run down and get a new queen. If you would like to get this smart board for a discounted price, check the first comment.